don't want to be like everyone else. You want to be like unique. That's actually a different type of motivation that someone can have if they can actually build that kind of lifestyle for themselves. The way you react to specific scenarios really can impact the team, yourself, the company. Like if something negative happens, not blaming a specific person, taking it as a team. No matter what situation, it's always important to make sure.
So this is the first episode. We're trying this out, podcasting, and we don't have a name yet. Don't have a logo. That's gonna come. Obviously, when this episode's posted, there should be a name, or there will be a name, and
I'm very excited to figure out what the name is.
There will be a logo as well, and essentially that's kind of holding me accountable, because if there's anything in life, is that you have to hold yourself accountable, not just from yourself, but through your network and the people around you. And me making I think saying statements, truly kind of, especially in front of people, really gives you that accountability. Like, I can't come to you and say, hey, I want to do something, or I'm going to do this, and not end up doing it. And then you're going to come back to me if you see me a year from now. You're going to say, hey, Khalid, how was this?
How was the podcast?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like if I don't commit to it, then essentially I wasted my time, I wasted your time, and I took up your space. So, like, going along those lines, do you think in your time, like, especially I think from an academic background, you can see a lot of times with procrastination or whatever it may be, that you wanted to do things, you said you would do things, maybe internally or externally, you've told your friends, oh, I'm going to work on the assignment today, but then you end up spending a couple hours playing video games or watching TV. Have you had times in your life where you were like, I want to do something, but I have not done it, or you feel like not necessarily ashamed, but it's like, why didn't I do this?
Absolutely. Especially, I think everyone at some point in their life has definitely succumbed to that pressure of like, okay, I can do this a bit later. That procrastination type of feeling. It's something that I feel like everyone has to. But as you kind of get older and you start from either you're in high school, you go to university, or you're in kind of a professional setting, you realize what the effect of procrastination is. Because let's say you're working a 9 to 5, and then you kind of waste the whole day, and it's 4 p.m. and you have that 1 hour to do your work.
Yeah.
If you actually pace yourself throughout the whole week and you can finish everything, you can finish by 5, for example, and then the rest of your week is a lot more structured to be able to like do things. So when you get older, those are the type of things that you do realize. I'm not a master of it yet as well. I would say that I'm still very young within my career, and I feel like, especially in our generation, we have like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, all those things.
Lots of distractions.
A lot of distractions, short dopamine hits. Yeah. So it's very easy to get distracted, right?
Correct.
So from that standpoint, it's a struggle, but I would say, especially when you want to focus on something, it's very important to really put everything away and kind of realize what you're actually trying to do intrinsically, right? So, like, I want to accomplish this today. So then, in order to be able to finish that or have some type of tangible impact in your job, work, family, any specific type of relationship, it's very important to make sure that you hold yourself accountable to do that. Because especially within the type of culture that we see nowadays, a lot of people try to deflect, and if they make a mistake, it's very important to actually kind of go against the grain and say, look at yourself introspectively and say, actually, I did something wrong here. What am I going to do in order to make sure I don't repeat that mistake, for example? And then building constructively on that, because especially even from a humanistic type of view, it's crucial to be able to hold yourself accountable, have friends that hold yourself accountable, parents, even your boss. Even if your boss, it might not communicate it in the best way, which is very common, everywhere, right? It's important to really separate with what they're saying and figuring out what can you do as a person to really take that feedback and then move on and kind of develop a thick skin and like trying to navigate through whatever task or path you're trying to do, right? So it's always up in the air.
So what would you say, like, because you mentioned working 9 to 5 and all that stuff, like in that example, what would you say, and you mentioned the boss as well, what would you say would be the key factor in maintaining, like, let's just say you had a boss that wasn't necessarily giving you that accountability, giving you that responsibility. Would you say that you need to assign that to yourself and say, hey, like, let's just say you're doing some Excel workbooks and all that kind of stuff, something that could be done, whether you make a Python script or whatever it may be. What would you say to someone who's like, okay, my boss isn't holding me accountable, I'm not holding myself accountable, I have free range to do whatever I want. how do you see that like how would you tell someone to progress in
Yeah,
that situation?
there's a lot of different scenarios where you can basically play this out. Based on my very limited experience, it's very important to be able to go to the person you report to, your boss, for example. This can also apply in, like, external to work or professional settings, but you need to go out of your way and ask them and be like, I gave you this piece of work, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to give me 3 points on how I can improve this specific task that I did for the next type of iteration that I do, for example. That's it. You have to kind of go after them to make sure that they hold you accountable, and especially when you're young, you need people to hold you accountable, because then you don't want to develop bad habits. Let's say in the workplace, for example. From a culture standpoint, it's very important to be able to hold each other accountable, your coworkers, for example, developing that type of environment where even if you are the boss, for example, or if you're the manager, you can have people on our team go to you on the side and say, look, I actually think this might be a better way of doing things, and being open-minded. It's important to be open-minded from yourself to want that first. That's like the first step.
So you're saying basically to impose that initiative on yourself.
Exactly. It's always everything in life, work, school, everything is pretty much on yourself. It's something that it's been hard to grapple with, honestly, because I've always kind of thought that, let's say you go into a job, you have a mentor, they pretty much teach you whatever you need, and then you go from there. Based on my experience, it's kind of navigating it yourself and figuring out, how am I going to become an asset for your podcast, for example. How am I going to be an asset for the company, and how am I going to really make myself indispensable in the future, so that people can start relying on me, and then I can really produce and then progress, and kind of that exponential growth from a career standpoint. So it's very important.
So you would say, I guess to sum it up, it'd be like providing value.
It's always about providing value.
I see.
It's always about
no matter what situation.
No matter what situation, it's always important to make sure what type of impact you are having. Quantification of impact. And just to maybe give a bit of background from myself, myself and yourself, we did undergrad together. We both started off in life science degrees. And especially from my perspective, I think we both talked about this, off the pod as well. But we both knew we didn't want to do medical school, pharmacy school. It didn't really fit our niche and kind of what we wanted to do. And from my perspective, the way I was thinking was, what type of field, or what can I do based on the skills I've acquired, through my degree, my undergrad degree? Where can I really find the biggest quantification of impact? Where can I have an impact, do something different compared to other people, different paths that people have not done, especially where we kind of live in North America. It's a very standard trend where you do engineering, you get a job, and then you kind of, you chill. What are you going to do in order to kind of deviate out of that path? But it's like a good deviation, right? You're trying to understand how you're kind of wrestling with, you don't want to be like everyone else, you want to be unique, right? So that's something that I always have thought about, and that really the point about impact, providing value to society, let's say in general, because I'm in the healthcare sector, providing value to society. That's kind of the way you try to evaluate things now.
Right. So on that note, because like you said, we spoke about this as well earlier. It's we both started off in the life sciences, health science kind of field, biosciences, whatever you want to call it, and faculty of science essentially. And would you say that, seeing where you are now, and like you said, or like you said, we didn't want to do med school. We found med school wasn't the thing for us. Pharmacy wasn't the thing for us. Dentistry, all the help basically. So would you say that you not necessarily regret, but would you say you would take back your education, or would you have done something differently in your undergrad? Would you have switched to let's just say philosophy, sociology? Do you think that completing a degree in something, let's just say that you had a change of mind, is something that you would encourage other people to do?
It's definitely crossed my mind, but I'm a firm believer of everything happens for a reason. There's a specific path for everyone. Everyone has their own independent type of journey. So I definitely don't regret with what I did from an undergrad standpoint, because even when I think back to it, I'm like, what else could I really have done? I was midway through my degree, and I really wanted to study economics, politics, philosophy. But then I really thought am I going to be able to, you could have an impact 100%.
Correct.
But especially because of like the traditional cultural type of mindset that I have, is that how am I going to be able to have a good job, a good career and stuff like that by pivoting into that field? I'm sure you can, by the way, but maybe that's just, I didn't choose to go that route. But eventually a lot of these things kind of really worked out, like being able to have like a life science background, let's say being able to understand some random drug mechanism, for example. Like if I am in a meeting with someone and they're speaking about what type of drug that they potentially are thinking about it's coming to the market, I can have a kind of very basic or elementary understanding. So things always work out in ways that you don't really anticipate. So I would say I don't regret it, but things could have been done better, I guess. Yeah.
So would you say for school, because maybe for a lot of us or people even watching or listening, that you kind of went through school like dreading it, saying, okay, I can't wait till I finish. I can't wait till the fourth year.
Absolutely.
Were you in that boat, or were you kind of like hitting school saying, I'm so happy to be here right now, you know?
No, that was definitely not my mindset. Some people really like school. I've always waited to see what life was like after school.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, we did undergrad in COVID as well, so it was a completely different experience.
Yeah, we finished it off.
Yeah, we finished it off during then, but I was always looking forward to, you know, being able to either go into education that's a lot more focused, like a master's degree. I always felt that undergrad was very broad. You know, you're not really picking up the specific skills that I wanted to learn, for example.
Yeah.
So it's just, you just gotta, it's kind of like the process of being disciplined. Like you show up to class, you take exams. That's what you learn from undergrad, basically. Like you commit to something for 4 years and you actually finish something off. That's an achievement for anyone that's able to do that, because it shows that you have some type of discipline to be able to start a task and you know, finish it all the way.
So in that, on that note, would you say basically, because something I was thinking about was that like once I finished school, like university specifically, and I was into the workforce, or even just looking for jobs, it was kind of like I was at a standstill, because it's like when you're in university, you're in school, you have set schedule. You know, at some point you pick your schedule, you get to choose your lectures and stuff. So like you said, you know, you get that discipline. But something I found that perhaps we don't necessarily look at school this way, but it's like the other thing we can value from getting an education is that you kind of learn how to build your own structure.
Exactly.
And I think that for me, that was the epiphany I had within the most, like, you know, I finished school not too long ago, like about a year ago. So it's kind of like the epiphany I had 6 months ago was I just need to find that structure. I need to build that structure post education.
Absolutely. Like I finished my master's I graduated in June, and I was just like, what am I going to do with all my free time? Like, what am I going to do? Like, usually I have some assignment to work on. You have some person to meet about a project. You never know. But it's like you said, like being able to find hobbies, for example. Yeah. Like I play soccer during the week, or you go to the gym. Like very constructive habits that you build around your kind of work schedule. Yeah. And that actually allows you to really grow in other aspects, because you're not being paid to do any of these activities. It's very intrinsic, and that's actually a different type of motivation that someone can have if they can actually build that that kind of lifestyle for themselves. You can use those skills. Let's say you go to a new country, for example, you do the exact same thing. It's very transferable type of life skill to be able to build your own schedule. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. For sure, absolutely.
So would you say like along that line is like for people, for example, who might think to themselves that, oh, I can't do that, I can't pick up a habit, I'm stuck behind, how do I get out of this rut? If you could give someone an example of, you're not necessarily about your life, but if you had a solution of how do I get over that rut of thinking, okay, like how do I find something to do outside? How do I like not necessarily manifest myself elsewhere, but how do I not only just focus on my work? How do I have actually, that's the question I wanted to ask is what are your thoughts about work-life balance? Do you think that's a thing?
I definitely think work-life balance is a thing, because I work in a very small startup. Initially when I started my working for the first time, I was like, what's work life balance? Like, I don't
Yeah.
think it actually matters. Like, I'm just gonna just grind 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
No one can tell me otherwise, and I'm going to do this, right? And I thought I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Everyone around me was saying, "You're gonna burn out. You're gonna burn out." I'm like, "What's burnout? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never really experienced it before." But uh, so then I was working a lot, and then I kind of basically hit a point where I was just like my mind just basically shut off, and
Mm-hmm.
I was not even being as productive as I could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's kind of when I realized that by being able to, being able to structure things outside of work actually makes you do your job a bit better, because you're
Okay.
from a mental health perspective, I felt a lot more. I wanted to really attack the day.
Mm-hmm.
Work wasn't on my mind 24/7.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not the best person to ask this. There's a lot more qualified people that speak about, the chemistry and all those things. But being
Yeah.
able to like do just being able to keep yourself busy and occupied outside of work it's really important, because I think it directly translates into better performance as well.
Right. So would you say like the focus aspect of it is something that needs to be trained, or like kind of switching that off is like, I know some people say like, oh,
Hmm.
after 5 p.m. my laptop's shut, everything's shut down, my work phone's turned off. Like, do you think you kind of have to maybe have like a physical cue, like for example maybe switching a room, you sit in your
Hmm.
office and then maybe
Yeah.
you go down the hall or something, like if you work from home, it's like if
Yeah.
you go to the bedroom for a bit, or do something else, go to a different room to kind of shut off. Do you think like having something that disconnects you from that work like
Yeah,
mindset?
yeah. I feel like there's two questions there, right? So the first thing is, how do you shut off, I
Yeah.
guess. So initially I didn't even believe about shutting off. I'm like, I'm always going to be available for work,
Okay.
basically. And some people might come to me in the comments like, oh, you have a toxic mindset, but I'm taking it back. Like, I don't agree with what I used to think. But especially from turning off, it's about understanding, like, look, I can actually do this today, but it's like 7:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more productive for me to be able to do this tomorrow at like 9 a.m.
Right.
and finish it probably a lot faster, which is better for me, better the
True.
company, for example.
True.
It's better for everyone, and I'm more well rested, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to evaluate it from that, I always used to think like, oh, if I don't finish this, it's going to be the be all and end all, for
Right.
example, because you're young, you want to make an impression.
Yeah.
But it's not really how things work, especially when you're kind of in that startup type of atmosphere, which I know we'll touch upon later. But it's about pacing yourself. You need to be able
Okay.
to pace yourself so that you don't burn out, for example. You don't shut off,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to kind of incrementally grow something from, it's like a seed all the way to like a
Yeah.
sprout to like a plant, right? So it's very important to do that. And from the aspects of like diversifying your environment, I'm a firm believer in that. I'm actually against the grain where I actually enjoy going into an office
Okay.
once in a while.
Yeah.
Work from home is sometimes too comfortable for me.
Yeah.
But and I'm a very, like, I would say I'm a social person. I like to see
Mhm.
people. I like to see my team, etc. So, but that's another way that's very common. And I've also seen, like, myself, like if I go to like a WeWork, for example, in Toronto,
Yeah.
I'm able to maybe get more work done that day versus yesterday, and
Yeah.
that might just be purely from an environmental perspective.
Right, okay.
Or so it definitely does have an impact as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned about starting from a seed, and that we touch on the startup stuff later, but mentioning starting like the growing of a seed is essentially what the course life of a startup is.
Hmm.
You have a CEO, they have an idea, they start something up,
Yeah.
and essentially take a seed, plant it, and hopefully push through and be successful in that industry. And like on that note, because it's not common for someone like, I know everyone, like we spoke about this earlier, is like everyone says, oh, go work for a startup if you can't find a job, or
Hmm.
like just go work kind of not necessarily for free, but it's like go work at a lower wage and
Hmm.
hustle, like you said.
Yeah.
We kind of get that impression that when you work at a startup, it's you're working 24/7, you're
Yeah.
always on the clock, you're getting paid peanuts, and
Yes.
you still have to you have to show up.
Yes.
So from your view, like what persuaded you to go from like to have that 9 to 5 mentality, or like that 9 to 5 ideal job, to let me try a startup, especially in the health field? Because when you think of startup, for me personally, when I think of startup, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of software companies,
Yes.
Silicon Valley,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But
that's very glamorous, by the way. It's not usually
yeah,
like that.
yeah, but that's where I'm trying to
Yeah.
like deep dive and find out more, because I'm very ignorant in that
Yes.
space. So
Yes.
it's like, from your perspective, especially from the health field, what kind of essentially put that seed in you to, hey,
Yeah,
let me
yeah,
try something
absolutely.
different?
It kind of goes back to I was in my third year of undergrad actually, and I honestly did not know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Like, and I was actually trying a bunch of different jobs to see, like, am I gonna like this?
Mhm.
I tried doing research. I thought it was very slow paced. I didn't really enjoy it.
Right.
So I was like, what am I going to do based on that kind of impact point that you brought up earlier? So what can I do that is really gonna allow me to have like a really big impact on something. You know,
Right.
I don't want to be someone small in a big company, because I'm probably not gonna learn as much. So
Fair. Yeah.
that's one reason. The second reason was, I would say sometimes I'm a bit of an impatient person,
Okay.
and I wanted to upskill myself as fast as possible.
Okay.
So when you go into a startup environment, you have often the autonomy to be able to learn a lot more aspects of creating a business, for example.
Mm-hmm.
A couple examples would be when you're in a startup and you're managing a team. You have to be able to manage all the emotions for everyone on the team, being able to establish communication guidelines, practices, all those things. If you go into a big company, for example, all those things are usually typically established.
Correct.
And you don't really understand the impact of what that specific type of framework is. When you don't have it, and you have to really foster that type of culture, then you really value a good workplace culture is actually, it significantly impacts employees, for example. So a lot of those things with regards to upskilling as fast as possible. I feel like personally I've learned so much over like the year and a half that I've been at a startup,
Right.
where, you know, you have a lot of ups and downs, being able to really control your emotions. I feel like that's something that I've really learned the most.
Yeah.
Especially sometimes you could be really stressed out. You spoke about not letting work maybe even affect other aspects of your life.
Right.
Being able to kind of separate it. That's something that I've also kind of learned, because even if you have like not a great day at work, for example, and at a startup, sometimes you can have really bad days, or sometimes you can have really great days where you have like amazing impact.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to maintain a specific type of emotional level where you don't go too high, you don't go too low, and you kind of just, you know, stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's helped me become emotionally mature from a professional standpoint, maybe a personal standpoint, but I'll let other people be the judge of that.
Yeah.
But that's something that I feel like if you want to be able to upskill yourself just as fast as possible, being able to get really into like the dirty, being able to maybe establish a framework from ground up.
Yeah.
It's just then you actually see the validity behind a lot of these like scientific frameworks and all these big things like Agile, for example. Agile, very typical software framework. I was like, is Agile, like, what's so great about Agile?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very naive of me, by the way. And then we really put it into practice, and we saw real tangible efforts of development speed, communication, being able to output features, for example, retrospectives.
Mm-hmm.
All those things really help keep the team really close knit and really fosters a good culture. So those are the type of things that I've seen from a startup, I guess.
So you did mention the startup you work at. We don't have to name names here, but like, you did mention that you guys have 11 people now.
Yes.
Is it you guys start with 11 people, or did you guys?
No,
grow?
it was definitely smaller, and we've been able to grow, but even like interviewing people, for example, like you can. At a bigger company, typically your manager would do all the interviews. I've been able to be fortunate enough to sit in on some interviews and see actually how do you actually identify talent, for example. How do you identify if someone's really ready for a startup?
Right.
You can judge their emotional maturity, their professional skills, their personality, how they really deal with conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So even like when you go into those job interviews and they ask those very, you know, standard, in this situation, how do you behave? Like there's actually some truth behind to it.
Okay.
Because it really, the way you react to specific scenarios really can impact the team, yourself, the company. Like it, I've seen it. So it's being able to get that kind of first or primary perspective on things has been very helpful.
So how many people did the startup start with?
Maybe it was, I don't know. It kind of predates me. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, okay. So you joined basically a fresh startup almost.
Yeah, it was like, it was established for a bit.
Okay.
And then we wanted to launch something new, so that's when I joined. But yeah, it's kind of, I'm not 100% sure, but so it was definitely like 0 people in the beginning. And
yeah,
then,
for sure.
Bringing it up, right?
Because I think one thing I would like, maybe like if we look at other startups as well, sometimes we see their growth not necessarily be exponential, but more parabolic almost.
Yes.
Right, where it's kind of like, you're working very slowly, and then
exactly.
At some point you start rising.
It's very rare actually for a startup to just have that clean curve.
yeah. Or
like you're gonna definitely experience highs and lows. That's kind of more how it is, and it kind of goes back to that. When you have the experience of kind of dealing with those things, a lot of things don't really phase you that as much anymore. Even like within like life, for example, if something like happens to you like on this, or someone like cuts you off in traffic, you're just like, okay, like moving on.
Don't let it affect you.
You just like, it just doesn't affect you. So it's just, so it kind of develops you like thick skin, for example. Just being like level-headed is very important.
Right. So if you were to say that there's one thing that would inhibit growth, not necessarily for a company, but for an individual.
Yes.
Because essentially, when you think about it, a startup is essentially a group of people, a community that is trying to grow.
Yeah, you're working for each other.
Yeah, essentially, right? So if you could pinpoint one thing or one activity, one trait that you can attribute to the ability to grow, what would you say that is?
So I'll talk about it from like a like a personal perspective, not like a company perspective. Don't want to go too much into company details.
You're no PR representative.
I'm an employee. I like my job. But from a personal standpoint, the main thing that I've learned is definitely that it's that emotional maturity that really can set you apart. Like being professional. People say like you should be professional at work. Like, what does that actually mean?
Right.
Being professional at work. It's being able to be respectful to everyone, being able to, show up with a smile, for example, being receptive to feedback, being able to, if you're dealt with a problem and you can't solve it, reaching out to other people. Okay, can you help me solve this? Let's work together and solve this.
Yeah.
If something negative happens, not blaming a specific person, taking it as a team, and then really working from it.
Right.
So I feel like the emotional maturity is very important, and that's kind of what separates people that are like leaders, for example, like CEOs, for example, that are very level-headed. They don't really make rash decisions. For me, like I would love to work with someone like who is like that, because it's like it's very important. Not saying that the person that the people that I do work with are not like that. I'm just saying like in general, like you would want to work for someone that is like that, because then you're able to like get that constructive feedback, constructive criticism as well.
Would you say that's like the trait as you're describing it? I would say it's kind of like an open mind, because when I personally, like you mentioned road rage. Yeah. But it's like when I'm driving and say someone cuts you off, or they don't put their blinker on, and you're like, "Yo, why'd you do this?" And some people might start screaming, hitting everything.
Yes.
But sometimes, or even like sometimes you do something by accident.
Yep.
And someone starts honking the horn, flipping you off, and all this stuff.
Yes.
And like something that I started to practice myself, and maybe that's where the open-mindedness comes from, is kind of like, you don't know what the other person's doing.
Exactly.
And I think maybe that's the trait I kind of tried to get.
Absolutely.
Is that I'm not that I'm trying to get any trait from you or anything. I'm just trying to genuinely learn. But it's like sometimes when you're in that road rage incident, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know what.
You don't know what that person went through that specific day, for example. Being able to relate on like a human level, for example, like you don't know what people are going through outside of work, right?
Exactly.
You never know. Sometimes people could just break down in front of you. And then you're like, instead of being like, oh, why aren't you doing your job, for example, like you need to say, look, like I'm here to just speak to you because, we work together.
Yeah.
it's very important for me to have a really good relationship with you. Like, what's wrong? Like, what's up?
Yeah.
Like, it's very important to be able to sympathize, and I think maybe you're touching upon is like empathy. Like,
essentially, yeah. Like at the end of the day, we're all humans.
Yeah.
And you know,
we're all human.
Yeah.
We know. I think also being open-minded is a very underrated characteristic that we don't see. A lot of people are very fixed in their ways, and they don't want to change. Especially when you're young, you want to be very adaptable and kind of malleable and try to see how people work. For example, there's not one correct way of starting a company, for example.
Right.
So being able to just filter through the good and the bad, and then being able to see like, okay, this worked here, so I'm gonna actually transfer this to here. So you don't. There's like a lot of ways where being open-minded can really get you places, I think, for sure.
I see. Okay. Because I mean, when you're necessarily like, we're not necessarily like, when you're open-minded, that does like open you to things and like kind of, I think it expands your skills on what you can do, because essentially you're never going to sit there and say, oh, I don't know how to open up a Word document, I'm not going to try.
Exactly.
Right.
A lot of people they're not self-starters. They're like, if everything is not there like in the specific like way that it's supposed to be, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, it's like
you shut down. Like, you cannot do that. Like, you cannot. Everything's not everything's gonna be perfect. In a bigger company, they set you up to work like a lot better. Like, they remove all those micro decisions.
Yeah.
But especially like when you're young, you want to learn. You have to really just accept with what you're given. You know, be grateful. Like, look, I'm in this position. Like, not a lot of people have this.
Yeah.
And then just kind of running with it.
So, on that note, because like when you think of like these, if you're into that mindset growth and all that kind of niche, a lot of the times they tell you it's like, hey, you have to be out of your comfort zone, you have to grow, you have to push, you know, even when you don't want to, you got to do it. Would you say you get that similar vibe with, say, maybe a startup where it's like, maybe you want to do something, or you don't want to necessarily do the work one day, but it's like, no, this client is waiting on me, or my boss is waiting for me, you know what I mean?
Yes, no, absolutely. People rely on you. Like,
yeah,
people are always relying on you, especially when you're in a smaller team. You have actual responsibility, which translates into revenue, impact, relations, customers. Like, there's so many ways. If you don't do this task, for example, maybe they're gonna have a bad impression of you. Like, there's so many different ways where your specific decisions, or if you don't want to do something, can have like big impact.
Yeah.
And it's very important to hold yourself accountable, like you said, and being able to just push through. I don't know if that's a great thing. It's a very lazy way of explaining things. But
but at the end of the day, though, like, it's like, you might say it's a lazy way of explaining something, but the reality is, at the end of the day, you just have to you kind of just, you have to do it. You have to push.
Yeah, I think especially when you're young and you want to grow, it's very important to be like, you have to humble yourself. Like,
okay,
like I actually don't know that much, and I'm gonna actually learn from this person who has more experience than me.
Right.
And then maybe by the time I'm a more seasoned, then I can actually impose more of what I kind of believe in. But it's really important to really like take a step back and say, look, you're young. Even though you might be in a leadership position, you need to even speak to your team candidly and say, like, I might not know something very specific about computer engineering, for example, and me and you are on a team.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to ask you more questions and not just make assumptions and say, just because I'm this person here doesn't mean that I just know everything about computer engineering, right? So it's like, humility is also very important for growth.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned being humble in a leadership position, and I did see that you were you became an adjunct professor for a course or two.
Yeah.
Like, can you, like, from your perspective, like, from being a student not too long ago, how did you find like that shift into teaching, and like, what made you say, yeah, I want to try this?
I've always felt like it's kind of like a duty for me to like give back to people that have always helped me. Maybe that's something that I've been instilled from like external environmental factors, for example, but that's always something that I've felt like is the right thing to do always, like, especially in the product management space where I work as a product manager. A lot of people want to come into the space. It's not going to be, me gatekeeping. I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's always going to be like, we can get on a call, we can talk. What are your aspirations? How can I help you? Teaching, I always found it fun to like interact with different types of people. Like I would say I'm still young, right? So I can relate, give like a different perspective to like students, for example. So it's definitely something that I've always wanted to do, and hopefully I can continue to do it, but you never know.
Would you say a PhD is in your future, or would you not limit yourself?
I don't know, but if I wanted to do like that type of theoretical type of teaching, the type of teaching that I would like to do is more like hands-on practical, like maybe like career coaching, helping youth from going from 0 to 1, for example, like getting that first job, for example. That would be something that I would be more interested into. Just PhD's a lot of commitment. I don't know if I could do that.
Well, I'm sure you could, because based on your skills and what we know of you, man, like
you never know.
You've been up to great things, and I'm sure you're gonna do many great things in the future. And
very very gracious of you.
Well, no, it's like it's honest. Like it's honest. Just seeing like us growing up, like especially in uni and stuff, like.
You never know what's going to happen, right? We see each other on the campus, we see everyone doing like their own thing, and then you never know, then you don't see anyone for like a couple years, then you're like, oh, hey, like what's up? Like, and you see them, they're like, everyone's doing well. It's like nice to see it, right?
Well, that's essentially what happened between you and I, right? We haven't connected in a while, and then, I shot you a message, and here we are. And, like that's essentially the circle of life, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone that's young, this also includes myself. Like I'm not perfect, right? But like being humble takes you a long way, because a lot of people know more than you. Like 100%. Like a lot of people, like my parents know more than me. So it's just like a lot of people know more than you.
So would you say then, like in terms of that humility and humbleness and stuff, would you say that it's important for someone to like kind of get themselves a mentor? Or
absolutely, 100%. So? Getting a mentor is something that I finally being able to like find people that I've been able to like contact, and I have a mentor. It's something that I would always recommend anyone, because I went for a period without a mentor, and I felt lost, and I was like, is the stuff that I'm experiencing, is this normal, for example?
Right.
So when you speak to a mentor that's far more seasoned than you, they actually can come to you and say, like, actually what you're dealing with here is actually pretty normal. Like, you just need to push on, and then you just need to go do the next thing, instead of thinking that the world is ending, everything's collapsing. They keep you grounded, and they're like, okay, like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. And if something red flaggy happens, for example, like they can point that out to you too, because they've had far more breadth of experience. So it's very important being able to find mentorship within your community, online, just even networking with people. Just like you messaged me on LinkedIn, for example, messaging people on LinkedIn to say like, hey, I really like your experiences. Can we get on a chat and see like how you got from this step to this step?
Right.
So and one thing that everyone needs to know is that people love talking about themselves.
Correct.
So when you ask someone like, oh, hey, can we speak about your journey, for example, like more likely than not, they'll probably say yes, right?
Because I was going to ask, that was my follow-up question, is how would you, like, from me personally, I might have mentors in my life that I'd never associated to be a mentor, like whether it's your dad, your mom, brother, sister, peers, colleagues, you never know who it might be. But how would you say someone can, you did mention to like message out on LinkedIn, but how would you say someone who doesn't know, or who doesn't know how to identify a mentor, how would you tell someone, okay, you know what, like, here's how to find a mentor? If you could say, here's a mentor 101 course, how would you say how to find a mentor?
A mentor can honestly be anyone. Typically it would be like within your field. It depends, like, do you want a life mentor, like a career mentor? I'm assuming we're talking about career, so let's talk about career. In my specific instance, I was always looking for like a mentor, and then I looked at specific events that were happening within Toronto, because we live in Toronto, and I was like, okay, there's something called the Toronto Product Management Association. Let me go to like an event, for example, and like I was able to like meet a bunch of people there, and then suddenly out of nowhere they're like, okay, we actually have a mentorship program. If anyone wants to join, you enroll. So it was like pretty random when you kind of you like put yourself out there, like you go to these events, networking, for example. You never know what is actually going to happen. actually have a science. This is just basically like if you just like you kind of stay out of your comfort zone, even if you're like alone, for example, in a big city, and you go to these networking events and you're like, okay, like I don't know anyone, but I'm gonna go up to this person and ask them like, what do they do?
Right.
That small step can actually have a big impact from you from like a huge career standpoint. They might be like hiring, for example. Like you never know.
Yeah. Or even just introducing yourself, just like getting your name out there, being able to talk to people, just talking to as many people as possible. Like even like in COVID, for example, like people couldn't talk to anyone. So like you were starting from basically ground zero. Yeah.
Just messaging as many people on LinkedIn. Like it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that?
Yeah. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
And
maybe, like, I don't know. I apologize to the people I've spammed, but
yeah, sometimes you get those, I know on LinkedIn you get those like sponsored messages and stuff. But like on that note, like I appreciate you sharing that because like, again, you know, sometimes you might not know you have a mentor in your life.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
If you can identify them, then you can kind of like skyrocket your productivity, not necessarily your productivity, but your effectiveness,
your growth.
And I think you feel then the value you provide. Because I think once you have once you identify your mentor, or like if you find a good one, I'm sure all mentors are good in their own aspects, by the way, but it's like you find the good traits and stuff. And I think that can definitely help you to project yourself to the next level. Right. And perhaps like that's what we all need today in a world where we have TikTok, YouTube Shorts, all this like this attention grabbing things, right? Like you can't necessarily walk down the street anymore without getting an ad in your face or something.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it's like for everyone that's like young, like I'm still young. It's just like you have to just try new things. It's very cliche. Just like you have to just try new things and see what happens. Like you don't know what the plan is. You don't know what's in store for you. You just have to try to, I would say, make your own luck, maybe even like a type of way. Like if you put yourselves in different social scenarios, you don't know what could happen. Like you have no idea.
Yeah. I think that hits on like you mentioning that statement is super important because I think that goes exactly to the point you mentioned where you found that there was this product manager committee where it's like if you can easily probably just go on Google and search, project managers of X city and find out people that are like you, or like you said, LinkedIn, maybe find someone's profile and he's the product manager of some company in the city you work in. It's like, hey, can we meet up for coffee? And I think maybe that's the thing, is that you have to look for those and you have to put yourself in those situations that will help progress you and show you that, you know, you are like, you are capable of doing things and you can do things, you know? Because I think a lot of the times, correct me if I'm wrong, or even add to this, is that a lot of the times people feel unfulfilled in their jobs or in their tasks.
Yeah, very common.
Right?
Very common. Like,
I think I've dealt with it in school.
I've dealt with it too. Yeah. Like I'm just like, there's like not even like work for me to do today. Like what am I doing here? Like I'm bored.
Yeah.
I want to always like I need something needs to be going on. Like something must be going on, right? So no, 100% I agree with you. Yeah, over there. But it's just regarding like fulfillment too. Like even like it's like there's gonna be points. I'm assuming it'll happen to me. It'll probably happen to everyone. You're not gonna 100% love your job, right? Yeah. So that can't be like, even if it's not like 100% what you want, like you gotta achieve that, say, like contentment, and then like push in other aspects, you know, and continue to upskill. So basically,
try to gain as many skills as possible.
Yes.
Because I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily like you're not being paid for like people might look at it and say, okay, I'm getting paid for the job that I do. But at the end of the day is that you need to extrapolate that and say, okay, just because I'm a product manager, for example, in your case, or like mine, I'm in cybersecurity. So it's like, just because I'm a cybersecurity person, it's like, doesn't mean that I need to stick to this niche.
Doesn't mean like you can't be like a project manager, or it doesn't mean like you can't do that.
Exactly. Like it's like reach out. Perhaps like I can probably message my boss and say, hey, I'm trying to learn more of HR, or I'm trying to learn more of this. Like,
absolutely.
It's like how like you just got to put yourself in those situations, reach out for it and stuff.
It's about that kind of like intrinsic will to want to be able to learn more. Usually what I've seen is that even like with young people, if you like, for myself, like the first thing that I always say to people is that I'm here to learn. Like I'm not here for a paycheck, actually. Like I want to learn. Like money drives a lot of things. I'm not gonna front. Like I like getting paid. Like of course. Like I think everyone likes getting paid. Yeah. But it's like, what am I gonna learn from this? Because that learning that you do now within, let's say, 22 to like 28 can really set your career up from 30 to like 50. because of what you've done there, just because on what you've learned. And then it can even maximize your earning potential, maybe. Like, you don't know. Right?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But I think at the end of the day, too, is like, even just having that skill, and it goes back to that point you mentioned where you don't necessarily need to be a computer engineer or a computer scientist, but to just slightly understand of what they're talking about. So it's like, if you have that idea of, okay, I know, I have an idea of what this client's talking about, so you can provide valuable input to their work, the work of the company and whatever it may be, or even like family-wise, right? Like, you can always provide value to something through the skills that you learn. And it's like, you just have to adapt your skill set to the jobs that you're doing, right? Like, obviously, like at home, you're not going to be working in Excel documents, but you can use maybe some of that and make like if you're tracking your finances, you can say, okay, well, I learned how to do this in Excel at work. Let me apply this at home.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of just like, use your skills in different avenues. And I think people shouldn't just associate themselves with a job, but how would you, like, do you think it's natural for someone to just be like, no, I want to be lazy, I want to do this, and that's all I want to do. I identify as the person that does my job, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, do you follow what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I understand. I would say, like, even like myself, like, I would consider myself to be lazy too. Like, I'm not, like, I can definitely be doing more.
Yeah.
But it's kind of about like a mindset thing on if you want to be able to like achieve or have impact, like you have to kind of snap out of it, I guess. Something that really kind of gave me that kick up the butt is like, when, let's say we were both doing science degrees, and then I was kind of understanding, like, if you want to get a job, they actually check like what transferable skills you have to succeed in that job. I'm in a science degree, and I'm like, I know how to do maybe like Western blotting, I know how to read science papers, but I don't want to even do a career in that. So what, like, how am I going to get a job, for example? And then that kind of like shook me to my core. I'm like, okay, like I have to do something just to, like, I have to gain like another skill just to be able to, even be employed and try to like get somewhere, right? So it's like, sometimes people will be like, oh, you're very naive for not knowing that this is what a science degree is. Like, we were both like kids, right? Like, we didn't know. But it's kind of like, sometimes when you need something to actually happen to you, and then you kind of realize, like, okay, like, this is the reality, like, you gotta like either sink or swim, and then that's it.
You get that wake up call.
You get that big like wake up call, like, you gotta basically pull your socks up and go to work.
Essentially, at the end of the day, right? But how, like, because especially today, it's very, I think, difficult to do that, because you can look online and say, okay, well, this guy's younger than me, but he's maybe making so much more than I am.
Oh yeah, comparison's a thief of joy, right? Yeah. I would say that everyone has their like own path. Like, you can't really compare. Like people could be like working at, let's say, Amazon right now or Google, and they're my age and they're earning a lot more money. Like, obviously, like, I'm very happy for them, but it's like me comparing myself to you, it's like, it's not going to really achieve anything. Like, it's going to achieve nothing. So it's about like keeping kind of perspective. Like, maybe you have to wait a bit longer, and then you can kind of get that type of job later, for example. So it's like about perspective, being patient, understanding that, like, it's okay for other people to do well. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's okay. Like, you should be actually happy for them. That should be your natural humanistic emotion. Like, if someone does well, like, if I see you have a good job, like, I'm happy for you. Like, that's it.
Likewise,
that's it, right? Like, you don't need to have any type of malice or anything, which is kind of some other things that I've seen. It's about just being like happy for people. And then if you have that type of mindset, like that non-negative type of mindset, then it really translates, and it can take you a long way, like either in your life or personal relationships, like everything. Like, just, it's very simple. Like, I'm happy for you, man.
Don't make things difficult.
Don't make things difficult. Just be happy for other people, and that's it.
Because I feel like maybe the comparison thing is more amplified because of our social media usage.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with posting like you on vacation or something.
No, right? There's nothing wrong with it.
But I think it's like, when you get, there's like that small hint of like unknown arrogance, like you don't know you're doing it, but it's like, oh, like, look at the purse side, or I mean, I don't buy purses, but it's like, look at the bag I just bought, look at the, I don't know if there's like some crazy clones out there, I have my go-tos, but it's like, look at this one I just bought, like, do you have this one? It's like, you don't have to necessarily be arrogant don't be arrogant. It's not a
Yeah.
good trait to have.
Yeah. It's also important that other people like hold you accountable, like whether it be like your wife, your partner, your friends. For example, friends is also really
Like
important.
put you in your place.
Yeah, they put you in your place. Like
Okay.
they tell you like, look, like I don't think you should actually act this way.
I
And like,
see.
and it kind of goes back into that circle of being open minded to be able to receive that feedback, right?
Mhm.
Because if you actually want to become the best person that you can be, like I apologize for the cliches, but just like trying to, it's a very basic type of human characteristics that we need to have.
Yeah.
That will, even like if a lot of people did this, like we would have a very different society than what we have right now.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of the problem with perhaps our societies nowadays is that we tend to fuel ourselves with hate rather
Yes.
than love, kindness, and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
kind of what we need in life.
Exactly.
Where it's
like if you see someone doing well, you're like, oh man, like this guy is really doing this. Like I'm really gonna be better than him.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you, it should be a different type of thing that drives you and say like, look, this guy's doing well. Like good for him. Like what did he do to actually get there? Like how can I actually not copy him, but like mimic what he's done so I can actually also try to get there.
Yeah.
Can I reach out to this person to ask him like what did he do? Like it should be a different type of mindset to want to be able to grow, I guess, maybe. I'm not an expert.
No, but you definitely have to have that for sure. Because if you don't, at the end of the day, if you don't have that mindset, you're just gonna be like kicking yourself, like you're gonna kick the dirt basically all day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming over and doing this podcast with me, and hopefully this isn't the last meeting we have. And we definitely learned lots. And for those watching or listening, we talked about a lot of things today, whether it's growing your mindset, finding a mentor, just living life in general, trying new things. And there's definitely value, I think, in no matter what conversation you have with anybody, there's always a value that you can extract. And I think one of the key things that I'm like, this is a message for myself first before I say it to anybody, right?
And myself.
It's like there's always value and good things to come from every situation you have. Even if you think it's the worst thing in the world, like even if you lose your job, sometimes there's like wisdom behind it that
absolutely
you need, like that you might not realize it this week, but maybe in a few weeks from now, it's like, okay, wait, I got fired, but then the company shut down 2 days later.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you don't know what the wisdom behind it is. Everything happened for a reason, like you said. But thank you so much for coming and joining me today.
No, I really appreciate it. I hope this really takes off. I'm very, very honored to even be invited. So like it's nice to see where you've been and like what you've become. So all the
likewise.
best as well. It's nice to meet with people that used to go to school with, right? It's always fun.
I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Sometimes people might be like, oh, you drift away after you finish school, but that might not necessarily be the case. Is like
you can always send someone a message. You don't know what's gonna happen, right?
Because like before we close off, is like I remember reading a post once where it was like, oh, if you haven't messaged somebody, know that they didn't message you back.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like if you have that mentality, it's kind of like, I'm not saying go out to your contact list and just blast, hey, how are you? I miss you and stuff.
Yeah.
Like obviously it should be with some
level of especially emotion. When you message people on LinkedIn, it should not be like I want a job. It should be like I want to learn about this. Like it needs to be productive. So the same goes back to what you're saying.
So it's like it's not necessarily that you have to be like, oh, just because you haven't messaged me, I shouldn't be like, I don't need to talk to him. Right? It's kind of like if we expand our horizons, it's like, yo, I haven't seen you in a while. Yes. Let's meet up. Let's talk about it. Like let's see how each other are doing. And like let's bring that community back together, right? And
Absolutely.
I think we spoke about this earlier. It's like bring that community back together, and essentially that's for everyone, right? Because we're so diverse here in the West. There's no point for us to sit in our own corners and cheer each other on when we can cheer everybody on and grow as a community, grow as a society. So thank you so much, Yusuf, for being here today.
No, I really appreciate it. And thank you.
Hopefully one day there'll be a studio and we'll have you there.
Absolutely. I'm waiting for it.
You're waiting for it.
No, so not one day. Now it's going to happen.
Yeah. So he's holding me accountable to this.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. I know I have to push hard and get this over. So like what Yusuf's saying, we need to have a studio. So like and subscribe. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and family. If you found it productive, let us know. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments. I'm not sure if you can comment Spotify. I don't really use it, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, essentially
comment on YouTube though.
Yeah, comment on YouTube, share it around, and let people know about this because I'm trying to grow it. Like I'm trying this initiative and trying to grow it, and you can be a part of that as well. And I think that's the key here. It's like grow a community, and as long as we all work together, we can get someone there. And if someone who's watching has someone that they'd like to have in the seat here, definitely let me know. Send me a message, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever it may be, and hopefully we can set that up. And thank you, Yusuf, for being here, and hopefully everything's going well. And if you have one more message you want to let the fans and everybody listening know, if there is a fan out there.
Keep an eye on this podcast. It's going places. You gotta keep an eye out.
Thank you. No, but for yourself, like, is there anything final message?
Just keep holding yourself hold yourself accountable, and that starts with myself too. Like, we're not perfect, but just keep keeping yourself grounded and understand like what you've done wrong today, and then you just build upon it. And that's it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching, and see you guys in the next one.